Reading 89 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3. Great Animal House, September 6, 1947. Separation and self-remembering. The energy of impressions is used up by the psychic machinery. I will ask you a question. What is the difference between a mechanical and a conscious man receiving impressions? The answer is that in a mechanical man, number 1, 2, or 3, the energy of impressions is not transformed. It is used up in turning roles or centers, in stimulating different eyes, in negative states, and in all those mechanical reactions, attitudes, pictures, and thoughts and feelings that men and women insist on taking as their real selves. In a more conscious person, one who can separate, this energy derived from incoming impressions is not wholly used up in working the mechanical psyche, but can pass it and become transformed into a higher energy. How is this possible? By self-remembering. This is called the first conscious shock. Mechanical people, that is, men and women in general, do not give themselves the first conscious shock. They do not remember themselves. For this they pay many penalties. That is, they are under the law of accident, and they, asleep themselves, dwell among sleeping people who cannot understand one another, nor can they attract the help necessary for them. Help cannot reach the second state of consciousness. It can only reach the third state, which we pass into when we remember ourselves. We cannot realize what penalties people on earth pay for not remembering themselves, save through studying ourselves when asleep. All the absurdities and cruelties of life, all the waste and imbecilities, all the vain glory and insincerity, all the lies, all the pretense and falsities and misunderstandings are due to one definite cause, as this work teaches, namely, people do not remember themselves. In consequence, they are driven, as by a belt, by constantly changing outer circumstances, war and peace, and so on. Life is constantly changing circumstances. What is it in us that thus is driven? It is the external, acquired side of us called personality. We have an outer and an inner man, an outer and an inner woman. If the inner were developed in each of us, the real essential part, all life would be different, and we would no longer be at the mercy of changing outer circumstances, now having something internally stable. But for this to take place, the practice of self-remembering is necessary. When a man and a woman remember themselves, they are no longer Smith or Mrs. Smith, Robinson or Mrs. Robinson, Brown or Mrs. Brown. In self-remembering, one does not remember the personality acquired by religion, education, and example, but something behind all this acquired part, which surrounds essence and is different in different people and nations, so that they can never agree. For one man merely to remember that he is a Mohammedan or a Sikh or a Hindu, another that he is a Christian, another that he is an Arab, another that he is a Jew, or again that he is an aristocrat or a doctor, or that he is a laborer, or that he is rich or poor, good-looking or ugly. All that is not to remember oneself. Each man, each woman, has at the back of them, deep to essence within, real I, that is neither Mohammedan, Christian, Jew, nor Arab, aristocrat, nor poor man, good-looking or not. So the work teaches that when a man or woman comes to the point of realizing his or her own nothingness, then this nothingness attracts real I. For if you are overswelling with yourself and your virtues and value, how on earth can you come in contact with anything real? So self-remembering, which is endless in its different forms, can never be based on your self-merit, but only on a gradual feeling, profoundly emotional. And by that is meant the inner perception of the truth about yourself, of your own unreality, which hitherto you have taken as yourself. So the work talks of imaginary I, or a false personality, and teaches in so many ways that this imaginary I, with which people advance into life, and which continually they suffer from, must be made passive. I remind you again of what we were told in France. Personality has scarcely any right to exist here. Just reflect what that means. Now, in regard to separation by non-identifying, it is said that in separating, say, from a negative emotion, that is, struggling not to identify with it, you must at the same time try to remember yourself, remember your aim, and remember all the work means to you so far. Then the force, withdrawn from some typical reaction by separation, passes into self-remembering, and so does not flood some other mechanical reaction. This is the beginning of the transformation of the energy of impressions. That is, Do 48 passes into Re 24 and eventually into Me 12. This short paper is written because of a difficulty that arose in a subgroup recently. A paper was read in which the following sentence appeared. The work says that we must struggle every day with identifying, and that this struggle takes very many forms and very many directions. For example, a man may, through his observation, realize that he identifies with someone, and may for a time separate himself from that particular form of identifying. But he will begin to identify with something else far more. It was said in the report, quote, "We all felt at a loss to understand why he should pass into a greater state of identification, subsequent to having observed and separated from one state." The answer is that if you take force away from one mechanical reaction, it will pass into and strengthen another mechanical reaction, unless you remember yourself and all the meaning of the work and your aim, and so give it a definite direction. If you do, the force of the work in you will increase. You starve yourself to increase the power of the work. There is another power apart from your own self-ascribed power. The power of the work demands a sacrifice of the self-ascribed power. To starve yourself to yourself is useless. If you starve a negative I by not identifying, and that is all you do, the force liberated will go to some other negative I. But if you give the force abstracted from the negative I to the whole sense and meaning and valuation of the work, it will be absorbed and stored by all those I's which lead eventually to real I. People fast or starve to increase their merit. They perform rituals, etc. But there is a phrase in the Old Testament where God says, "But have ye fasted unto me?" To fast, say, from negative states, for the sake of the work, means that the power of the work will increase in you. To obey the work is to fast unto the work. But all this is very deep and internally sincere.